Hello and welcome. If you're conducting research in business, management, or related fields, you already know how vital moderation analysis is. Today, we're going to dive deep into a really important paper by Zhu and Xiao that serves as a methodological roadmap. We'll be exploring the common, persistent errors that even the most careful researchers can make, and, more importantly, we'll see how a new, rigorous framework can help all of us improve our work.
Okay, so here's how we'll break it down. First, we'll get to the heart of the persistent problem itself. Then, we'll do a quick refresher on what moderation is, just to make sure we're on the same page. After that, we'll look at how the authors investigated the issue. Next, we'll zero in on the most prevalent issues they uncovered. And finally, we'll walk through the solution, their proposed roadmap for rigor. All right, first up, the problem. Why is it that even top-tier, rigorously reviewed research so frequently gets moderation analysis wrong? And what are the real implications for fields like information systems and management? You know, this isn't some new issue. Landmark reviews, like this one cited here, have been pointing out these alarming error rates for years. Think about that number for a second. Only 0.5% of articles manage to avoid all the known pitfalls. That's not just a statistic, it's a major call to action for our entire research community.
And here's the real kicker. Moderation is absolutely essential. We use it to build more nuanced theories and to offer practical insights that depend on context. But when it's done wrong, we run a huge risk of type 1 and type 2 errors. That means we could be claiming to find effects that aren't actually there, or, just as bad, completely missing important relationships that do exist.
So, to really get a handle on where these errors come from, let's take a quick step back and review the core concept of moderation itself. This will make sure we all have the same foundation before we dig into the more complex problems.
At its heart, moderation is pretty straightforward. It's the condition where the relationship between two variables, let's call them x and y, changes depending on the level of a third variable, our moderator, m. The moderator is what changes the strength, or sometimes even the direction, of that main relationship between x and y.
Now, the most common form you've probably seen a million times is the two-way interaction. This is the classic setup. The effect of your predictor, x, on your outcome, y, is conditional on the level of a single moderator, m. Simple and clean.
But of course, research questions are often more complex than that, which brings us to three-way interactions. Here, the relationship between x and y might depend on the joint influence of two different moderators, say m and w. It's like adding another layer of "it depends" to your theory.
And then things can get even more interesting when we integrate these ideas. Take moderated mediation. In this model, the effect of x on y goes through an intermediary variable, a mediator. But the key is that this indirect pathway is itself conditional on a moderator, m.
So, how did the authors figure out that all these problems are still so widespread today? Well, let's take a look at their very thorough two-part diagnostic investigation into the current state of practice.
And their method was, frankly, incredibly rigorous. First, they went back in time, synthesizing the evolution of the field by reviewing 30 foundational publications. Then, they brought it to the present day, conducting a massive, systematic review of 274 recent articles from top journals. This two-pronged approach let them identify the well-known historical issues and then precisely measure how common they still are.
So what did all that digging actually turn up? Well, there's a little bit of good news. 4 of the historical issues they looked for seem to have mostly faded away. But the bad news is pretty significant. They found that 15 critical problems are still pervasive in modern research.
And just how pervasive are we talking? Well, take a look at this number. 71.53%. That is the percentage of recent articles from top journals that made the single most common methodological error.
So that, of course, leads us to the critical question. What is this fundamental step that nearly 3/4 of recent studies are getting wrong?
And the answer is a failure to correctly report and interpret the moderation effect size. What happens is that many studies just report the interaction coefficient, the regression term we often call B3, and treat that as the effect. But that coefficient alone doesn't tell you anything about the practical significance or the magnitude of the moderation effect.
This chart shows the top 3 offenders. That effect size issue is number 1, as we just saw. But right behind it, over half of all studies failed to properly probe the interaction to actually understand and explain how it works. And beyond that, over 42% were unclear or inconsistent in how they handled mean-centering their variables.
Okay, so after laying out all these problems so clearly, the authors don't just leave us hanging. They propose a powerful solution, a comprehensive stage-based framework, a true roadmap designed to help all of us avoid these pitfalls right from the start of a project.
And here's a simplified look at that roadmap. As you can see, it breaks down the entire research lifecycle from theory development all the way to reporting. For each stage, it gives crystal clear should do and should not do guidance. For instance, look at the data analysis stage. It explicitly says to use metrics like delta R squared or F squared for effect size and to not just use that B3 coefficient we talked about. It's this kind of direct, actionable advice that makes the whole framework so useful.
Really, the whole point here is to change our mindset. We need to move away from trying to apply piecemeal fixes after the fact and instead adopt a systematic approach that considers these issues at every single stage of the research lifecycle. That's how we ensure our findings are both robust and valid.
Ultimately, this paper gives us 2 things: a powerful diagnostic tool to see where the problems are, and a clear set of guidelines for how to do better. And it leaves every single one of us who does this kind of research with a final, very important question to consider. Is my research built to last?